before we dive into one of the most intense true-life prison stories you'll ever hear, hit subscribe, smash that like, and share this video, because what you're about to see will change the way you think about life behind bars. The fog rolls across the San Francisco Bay like a living animal, thick, heavy, and deliberate, as though it remembers what happened on the island it blankets. The slow drag of dusk light slices through the mist, revealing the jagged silhouette of a place carved into American memory with steel, sweat, and salt water. Alcatraz. For more than 60 years, Alcatraz has been a monument to confinement. Its cracked walls and empty corridors serving as ghostly hosts to tourists, historians, and those who simply want to stand where the most dangerous individuals of the 20th century once paced. But the past few months have carried a different kind of visitor to the island. Whispers, rumors, chatter that flickers online, spreads through forums, and jumps from news segments to late-night conversations. And the whisper has only one question, sharp and electrifying. Is Alcatraz coming back? The idea alone strikes with the force of an earthquake. This island, abandoned as a functioning prison since 1963, swallowed by rust and memories, could be reborn? Who would dare propose such a thing? Who would want to? More importantly, why now? To consider the possibility, listeners must first understand what Alcatraz was, not the glamorous Hollywood version, but the living horror of its time. This was the Rock, a facility built not for rehabilitation, not for hope, but for the men the system had already given up on, the ones who thrived in violence, who commanded networks from behind bars, who corrupted other prisons with charisma or fear. Men like Al Capone, Machine Gun Kelly, and Robert Stroud, the infamous Birdman. Alcatraz was designed to break patterns, break connections, and sometimes break spirits. Inside its walls, the air was cold year-round, the food plain and functional, the routine rigid enough to erase identity. There was no privacy, no relaxation, no moment out of sight or sound. Even the sea seemed to collaborate with the prison, circling it with deadly currents colder than ice and stronger than hope. For the American public, Alcatraz became an emblem of punishment, control, and the dark philosophies of mid-century incarceration. When it closed, many thought the era it represented had ended with it. But history has a way of repeating itself, especially when pressure mounts. And pressure is mounting. Dotted across the United States are correctional facilities grappling with overcrowding, understaffing, technological gaps, and inmates whose influence extends far beyond their cell walls. In an age where a single smuggled device can connect a prisoner to an entire operation outside, isolation has become harder to enforce and harder to guarantee. This is the backdrop against which the Alcatraz rumor began to stir again. Late in 2024, a collection of digital documents leaked into obscure corners of the internet. They were not flashy, not stamped with official seals or dramatic headers, but buried within them were architectural blueprints, structural analysis reports, rough sketches of electrical systems, and even proposed energy solutions. At the top of several files was a simple title, Alcatraz Renewal 2025. No source, no clarification, no confirmation, just a package of carefully detailed documents suggesting someone, somewhere, was at least imagining what a modern Alcatraz would look like. Experts who examined the files disagreed fiercely. Some claimed they were too detailed to be speculative. Others argued they could be sophisticated concept art. A few believed they were early-stage planning documents, ideas floated internally, never meant for public eyes. But the leak gained traction because of one undeniable, unsettling truth. Alcatraz is a perfect site, geographically, psychologically, historically, for a new era of high-security isolation. And suddenly, the world found itself asking, who would want Alcatraz back? What kind of inmates would be sent there in the modern age? What technology would rebuilt island prison wield? And most importantly, what purpose would it serve now? As the fog lifts from Alcatraz's cracked windows and hollowed corridors, something else rises from beneath it, a possibility both thrilling and frightening. The possibility that the most notorious prison in American history may not remain a relic, but become a prototype of a future where isolation is smarter, surveillance is deeper, and control is absolute. And if that is true, if the whisper holds even a drop of truth, then the world may soon witness the rebirth of legend, a legend forged in bars and reinforced concrete, surrounded by cold waters and colder intentions. A legend named Alcatraz. If Alcatraz were to rise from the ashes of legend, it would not be a simple renovation. The leaked documents suggest a vision far beyond a 20th century model of brick, steel, and salt. They hint at a prison reimagined for 21st century, a facility designed to control not just bodies, but behavior, influence, and even thought patterns. Imagine, for a moment, walking through the pages of these blueprints, the pencil strokes replaced by cold, clinical lines that whisper both efficiency and fear. The first section lays out what is called the Deep Core Housing Unit. 12 cells stacked underground, reinforced with concrete and steel layers several feet thick, each with no more than a single door opening outward. Each cell is designed to monitor every movement, every heartbeat, every subtle change in posture. Sensors embedded in floors, walls, and ceilings capture vibrations imperceptible to human senses, feeding streams of data to a control system capable of predicting potential unrest. Cameras scan not just faces but micro-expressions, analyzing micro-twitches, pupil dilation, and gestures to calculate intent. AI-assisted algorithms map each prisoner's tendencies, crafting a predictive behavioral profile that updates in real time. The silent cell system is another innovation detailed in the plans. Here, sound is manipulated as a tool of containment. Walls, ceilings, and floors are layered with acoustic damping materials designed to suppress conversation, laughter, and even whispered plotting. It is not punishment in the traditional sense. It is containment elevated to a science. The cell becomes a hermetic environment where every sensory input is curated, every signal controlled. Even the smallest sound becomes a measurable parameter, tracked and stored. Surrounding this core is the isolation perimeter wall, a nearly transparent barrier that encloses the entire island. Embedded within it are thermal and motion sensors, each connected to a network of drones patrolling the sky. These drones move like mechanical seabirds, programmed to avoid predictability, to adapt to patterns, and intervene instantaneously when deviation is detected. The documents describe a system where even a single unauthorized step toward the boundary triggers a cascade of alerts, responses, and immobilization protocols. In other words, the perimeter doesn't just respond to escape attempts. It anticipates them. Powering all of this is a subterranean energy hub, designed to harness tidal and solar power. The architect of the plan imagined Alcatraz as a self-sufficient island, capable of operating in isolation without dependence on external grids. Every light, every sensor, every automated patrol, robot draws from a carefully balanced network of renewable energy. The hub itself is fortified, buried deep under reinforced layers to survive seismic activity, sabotage, or storms. It is a silent heartbeat for the entire prison, invisible but omnipresent. Another remarkable feature in the plans is the autonomous patrol network. These are not simply drones in the sky, but ground units, sensors embedded in walls, and robotic arms that patrol corridors. Human guards, if present at all, become supervisors rather than frontline operators. Their job is no longer to chase, restrain, or intervene in emergencies. The system is designed to do that automatically. Movement, conversation, and even subtle behaviors are constantly analyzed. Deviations from predicted patterns are flagged immediately. The documents even hint at predictive containment strategies, preemptive interventions before minor incidents escalate. The blueprints also describe the integration of AI-assisted decision-making into daily operations. In theory, if a prisoner exhibits unusual stress, agitation, or influence over others, the system calculates the risk and initiates responses, from isolation adjustments to environmental changes, without human bias or delay. No opinion, no empathy, no hesitation. Just intervention calibrated to data. And yet, despite the cold precision, the plans hint at the psychological weight of such a place. The designers clearly understood the power of isolation, of environmental control, of shaping perception. Hallways are narrow and intentionally disorienting. Lighting is manipulated to create cycles that unsettle circadian rhythms. Even temperature and airflow are used strategically to condition behavior. This is not a prison merely of cells. It is a prison as ecosystem, engineered to function like a living organism, with inmates as variables within its parameters. Reading these pages, one cannot escape a creeping sense of awe and unease. The old Alcatraz relied on geography and human vigilance. The new vision relies on algorithms, automation, and architecture designed to remove uncertainty. The island itself transforms from a passive stage into an active participant in containment. For a viewer standing at the edge of this revelation, a question looms. Could such a system, with all its technological and psychological controls, ever truly function as intended? Or would the ingenuity of human defiance adapt, exploit, and ultimately challenge the most sophisticated containment strategies ever conceived? What is clear, however, is that these blueprints depict a radical evolution, a vision where Alcatraz no longer symbolizes punishment alone, but becomes a laboratory for understanding control, where the ghosts of the past meet the machinery of the future, and every cell, every sensor, every algorithm contributes to a new chapter in the story of incarceration. And as you imagine walking through the corridors of the speculative Alcatraz, hearing the hum of unseen machines and the quiet, controlled silence, the island's legend grows. It becomes not only a historical icon, but a mirror reflecting the extremes of power, technology, and human ingenuity. A place where the boundaries between myth and reality blur, where the echoes of the past inform the calculations of the future, and where the shadow of the rock stretches further than ever before. To understand why Alcatraz might be considered for rebirth, one must look beyond the rusted walls and crumbling corridors to the pressures and challenges that define modern incarceration. Prisons today face problems that were unimaginable when Alcatraz first opened. Overcrowding has reached critical levels in many federal facilities, with inmates housed in spaces far smaller than regulations recommend. Staffing shortages mean that supervision is often reactive rather than preventative, leaving opportunities for violence, smuggling, and the maintenance of internal hierarchies. And in a digital age, influence no longer depends on proximity. Criminal networks can operate through encrypted messages, contraband electronics, and outside intermediaries, creating power structures that the traditional correctional system struggles to contain. The leaked 2025 documents, while speculative, suggest that the new Alcatraz would aim to resolve all these challenges in one place. Its isolation, literally surrounded by the Pacific Ocean, would make escape all but impossible. Its architecture, carefully layered and reinforced, would neutralize internal violence. Its technological infrastructure would reduce the reliance on human supervision, which is prone to error, bias, and exhaustion. From this perspective, the question is not whether Alcatraz could reopen, but why it might be considered necessary at all. The reasoning is chillingly logical. Certain inmates are deemed high risk, not only because of violent tendencies, but because of their ability to influence others, both inside and outside prison walls. Organized crime leaders, cybercriminals, and inmates with extensive networks pose a threat that conventional facilities cannot always neutralize. The speculation is that a modernized Alcatraz could serve as a containment hub for these individuals, a place where influence is stripped away through environmental control, isolation, and technological oversight. But beyond logistics, there is a darker layer: perception. In politics and policy, the optics of control can be as important as the control itself. A high-profile, ultra-secure prison sends a message that the system is capable of managing its most dangerous members. For the public, the return of Alcatraz would be a symbol of authority, a reassurance that no threat is beyond the reach of law and order. And for those inside, it would be a constant reminder of vulnerability, a psychological lever that amplifies the effects of physical confinement. At the same time, the proposal raises deep ethical questions. Isolation has profound effects on the human mind. Extended periods of solitude, sensory manipulation, and constant surveillance can produce anxiety, depression, and psychosis. The 2025 blueprints acknowledge this, noting that the environment must balance containment with sustainability, not simply to restrain, but to maintain the system itself. Yet, even with careful planning, the psychological toll on inmates would be immense, a factor that may be both intended and unavoidable. The document suggests that these risks are calculated, considered part of the trade-off in achieving ultimate containment. The reports also touch on the role of technology in modern corrections. Predictive analytics, AI-assisted monitoring, and automated intervention systems promise precision far beyond human capabilities. Algorithms can flag subtle behavioral shifts, anticipate patterns of interaction, and even adjust environmental conditions preemptively. While this may reduce incidents of violence or escape, it also shifts moral responsibility from human officers to code and circuitry. Who bears responsibility if a system misinterprets a gesture, a pulse, or a glance? The blueprint offers no clear answer. In this sense, the modern Alcatraz would not only be a prison, it would be a laboratory, testing the limits of control, ethics, and the intersection of humanity and automation. And then there is the broader societal question. What kind of problems do we choose to contain rather than confront? If Alcatraz were to reopen, would it be reserved strictly for the violent and untouchable? Or would it gradually become a tool to neutralize influence, ideas, or individuals deemed inconvenient or threatening? History reminds us that any system designed to remove human unpredictability carries inherent risks. Once isolation and observation become mechanized and invisible, transparency becomes the first casualty. And the lessons of Alcatraz's past, the escapes, riots, and ingenuity of inmates, remain relevant. No matter how sophisticated a system is, human adaptation often finds cracks in its armor. In essence, the rumors of Alcatraz 2025 are not just about bricks and steel or sensors and drones. They are about power, about the lengths society is willing to go to control its most challenging elements, about the tension between safety, freedom, and the unknown consequences of engineering containment at an unprecedented scale. The dark reasons behind the plan are practical, political, technological, and philosophical, all intertwined, and each forcing us to confront the difficult question: how far is too far when it comes to control? Walking the empty corridors of speculation, one begins to see the island not just as a relic, but as a reflection of our deepest fears, of chaos, of influence we cannot see, of systems that operate without empathy, and of the relentless human drive to impose order, even in the face of unintended consequences. Alcatraz, in this vision, is not merely a prison. It is a mirror reflecting both the power of containment and the price of ambition. Rumors rarely appear out of nowhere. They creep into public consciousness through small, overlooked observations, fragments of fact, and the fertile imagination of those who notice patterns others ignore. In the early months of 2025, several such fragments began circulating around San Francisco Bay. Tourists and photographers noticed something unusual. Boats with no official markings weaving unusually close to Alcatraz, carrying what appeared to be teams of people moving with precision and purpose. Headlamps swept across old cell blocks, glinting off rusted steel and the cracked concrete of stairways abandoned for decades. Lights flickered in spaces that had not seen electricity for years. The reports were inconsistent, fragmented, and often anonymous, but the pattern was compelling. Someone, perhaps a team of engineers, inspectors, or contractors, was actively on the island, moving through it in a way that suggested more than maintenance. Speculation spread like wildfire. Some assumed it was routine government inspection or filming for a documentary. Others whispered that it might be the early stages of a classified project designed to evaluate the island's viability for modern use. Those who examined satellite images from this period noticed temporary structures on the dock and unusual activity in the northeastern sections of the island. Small cranes, scaffolding, and equipment that did not match standard tourist or park maintenance appeared in patterns that some analysts found suspicious. Descriptions from eyewitnesses painted a haunting picture. One tourist reported seeing figures carrying clipboards and measuring instruments, pausing to examine crumbling stairwells and fractured masonry. Another mentioned what sounded like drilling and hammering inside the old cell blocks, though no source could confirm what the noises were. Even the gulls, those constant aerial sentinels of the bay, seemed unsettled by this unusual human activity. These minor observations, combined with the leaked 2025 blueprints, created a narrative that the island was under evaluation, not for tourists, not for history, but for something far more consequential. If the inspection was real, what might it have involved? Structural engineers were focused on integrity. Concrete weakened by decades of saltwater exposure, rebar corroded beyond repair, foundations undermined by weather and erosion. The island itself presents formidable natural challenges. Tides and currents that change daily, fogs that obscure vision, and weather that can turn a simple survey into a treacherous expedition. Retrofitting modern technology into such an environment is no small feat. Water-resistant enclosures, renewable energy hubs, and subterranean cabling must all contend with a landscape shaped by decades of neglect and the relentless pounding of the Pacific. Even if the goal were merely assessment, the complexity is enormous, and any outsider imagining a rebirth can only begin to grasp the magnitude of the engineering challenge. At the same time, there were administrative whispers, contracts, procurement documents, often listed under innocuous titles, that suggested an interest from private contractors experienced in high-security projects. Requests for equipment, secure communication devices, and temporary power systems were spotted in public records. None of these confirm a plan, but when combined with eyewitness reports and leaked blueprints, they form a mosaic that is hard to ignore. The choreography of activity, from boats to scaffolding, from measuring tools to drones in the sky, paints a picture of an island being quietly evaluated as if preparing for something beyond public awareness. The secrecy surrounding the island adds another layer of tension. Alcatraz is a National Historic Site, visited by over 1 million tourists annually. Any project that could alter its character, or even explore the possibility of altering it, must balance regulatory oversight, public perception, and logistical feasibility. The island's caretakers, those responsible for maintaining its historical integrity, remain silent, giving statements that are vague, cautious, and unconfirmable. This opacity fuels speculation. In the absence of transparency, imagination fills the void, and the legend of Alcatraz grows darker, more compelling, more real in the collective mind. But perhaps the most unsettling aspect of the inspection is its implication. If the island is being evaluated with such care, with eyes on structural integrity, technological integration, and isolation potential, then someone somewhere may be imagining it as more than a museum. The corridors of Alcatraz, long empty, haunted by echoes of past footsteps, are suddenly conceived as laboratories of control. Every cell, every wall, every stairwell is a potential vessel for surveillance, monitoring, and intervention. The wind that rattles the windows becomes a messenger of possibility, carrying hints of a transformation that could, in theory, turn history into function once again. Walking through the speculative inspection, one feels both awe and apprehension. The island is no longer only a relic. It is a challenge, a test case for control, security, and human ingenuity. A space where architecture and technology converge to create containment on a scale previously unimaginable. And the public, watching from the waterline or online forums, can only piece together the fragments, aware that the shadows of cranes and headlamps hint at something more than meets the eye. Alcatraz is alive again, but in what form and for what purpose remains a question that hangs over the bay like the mist, thick, insistent, and impossible to ignore. Standing on the rocky shores of the bay, looking at the skeletal remains of the cell blocks, the answer is as complex as the island itself. Officially, there is no confirmation. No government press release has announced reconstruction plans. No budget allocation has been made public. No environmental impact reports have been published. The National Park Service continues to manage Alcatraz as a historic site, preserving it for tourists, scholars, and the public imagination. And yet, the rumors, the leaks, the inspections, the unusual activity, all converge to form a compelling narrative. That somewhere behind closed doors, people are imagining Alcatraz not as a relic, but as a functioning prison once more. From a theoretical perspective, the island remains uniquely suited for ultra-secure containment. Its geography is unyielding, surrounded by frigid, fast-moving waters, far from any mainland escape route. Its isolation is natural, undeniable, and timeless. Add to this the potential of modern technology, AI-assisted surveillance, automated patrols, acoustic management, biometric monitoring, and the facility could operate in a way that traditional prisons cannot. No other site combines history, geography, and technological possibility so perfectly. To the architects, engineers, and theorists imagining a reborn Alcatraz, the question is not could it work, but what would it be used for? And that, perhaps, is the darkest and most compelling question of all. If Alcatraz returns, it would not merely house inmates. It could be a testing ground for a new era of incarceration, one where control is absolute, influence is neutralized, and behavior is quantified in real time. The ethical implications are enormous. Prolonged isolation, constant surveillance, and algorithm-driven intervention may reduce incidents of violence or escape, but at what human cost? Where does containment end and oppression begin? From a historical perspective, Alcatraz is already more than a prison. It is a symbol of authority, of punishment, and of human ingenuity confronting human unpredictability. The speculation about its return only magnifies that symbolism. In contemplating its rebirth, society confronts questions about the limits of control, the intersection of technology and governance, and the morality of isolating individuals deemed irreducibly dangerous. The leaked documents, the inspections, the whispers, all tell the same story. There's interest, real or imagined, in reviving the island as a functioning tool of containment. Yet, as with all legends, uncertainty dominates. The difference between myth and reality has always been delicate at Alcatraz. Its past is littered with stories of escape, ingenuity, corruption, and resilience. Any modern iteration would need to anticipate not just physical threats, but human unpredictability itself. The tendency for ingenuity to find a way through even the most sophisticated systems. And so the verdict is complicated. On one hand, nothing in public records confirms a plan. On the other, the combination of speculation, observed activity, leaked plans, and historical precedent makes the rumor compelling. Alcatraz, in the public imagination, exists in a space between certainty and possibility. Its legend persists not because of the physical buildings, but because of the questions it provokes about power, containment, and society's relationship with those it seeks to control. Finally, perhaps the most powerful truth is this: Alcatraz, whether reopened or left to crumble, will always loom large. Its story is not only about bricks, steel, and water, but about the fears, ambitions, and curiosities of those who built it, governed it, and imagined it. If it were to reopen in 2025, the island would carry forward its legacy of containment into a new era. If it remains closed, its myth only grows stronger, shadowed by the knowledge that its capabilities, both real and imagined, are unmatched anywhere else. As the tide crashes against the cliffs, as the gulls wheel overhead, and as the wind rattles the empty windows, one thing is certain: Alcatraz's legend endures. Whether through whispers of secret plans, technical blueprints, or the human imagination itself, the rock will continue to haunt the collective consciousness. It is a mirror reflecting society's hopes, fears, and relentless quest for order. And like all great legends, it thrives in the tension between the known and the unknown. For now, we watch, we listen, we imagine, and we recognize that some places, some ideas never truly die. Alcatraz remains in memory and myth, a prison unlike any other, a challenge to human ingenuity, and a symbol of what it means to confront both the dangers we contain and the fears we cannot fully control. Its future may be uncertain, but its power, psychological, historical, and cultural, is absolute. And perhaps that is the ultimate truth. Alcatraz is not just a prison. It is an idea that refuses to be forgotten, and one that, even in 2025, still commands attention, respect, and a measure of fear.